Well, hey there. Welcome to the show. I'm your host, Una Duncan, and I am super pumped about my guest today. You are going to learn more about fitness, fat loss, and building muscle in the next couple of episodes than most of my personal training students knew when they were coming into my certification courses. Because today, we are going to talk to Dr. Allan Bacon. Allan is a doctor of dental surgery turned coach. And when I say coach, I mean this guy trains the dudes that are competing in the Arnold Classic. He has published in scientific journals about training adaptations, and he helps people beat weightlifting records. He also works with average Joes and a lot of women going through the menopause transition. And this is how we got connected. I posted something. It was a clip from the Mel Robbins podcast where she had this woman on who said the one workout that every woman over 40 needs to be doing. And it was like 11 push-ups from the toes and 4 sets of 4 reps of deadlifts. And I was like, this is bullshit. And then someone in the comments tagged Dr. Allan Bacon and said, you've got to have this guy on your show. And I am so glad they did. And by the way, if there is someone you want me to interview, the best thing to do is to tag me in one of their posts and say you should go on at Una Duncan Show, or tag them in one of my posts saying you've got to interview at Jen Gunter about this. Because sometimes you very lovely people will send me a message saying, oh my God, you've got to interview Tim Caulfield about this. And I will try and get in touch with Tim, and it is a dead end, which I totally understand, because if I am getting 15 unsolicited interview requests every day, then I can only imagine their inboxes. So the better way to do it, and I love when you guys do this, use tagging to help me make these connections, and I will bring you killer interviews like this one. So for this one, I did my prep and I had a ton of questions to ask Allan, and I didn't get to any of them because we just went off. You are going to hear why the rallying cry of women are not small men is both true and it's totally being used to con you. We also talk about how to tell if it's actually your hormones or if it's your habits that are causing changes in your body. And Allan told me about the 10-day diet that he uses to test whether your metabolism is functioning. And this is actually brutal, but pretty freaking genius. And we talk about how menopause actually affects your fitness outcomes and why choosing a goal weight might actually be sabotaging you. And dude, that's just in part 1. We couldn't stop talking, so I broke this conversation into 2 parts. The second part will come out next week, but part 1 is ready for you right now. Here we go.
Breaking news. Your dream life isn't going to happen because you made a vision board. You're going to need goals, grit, and some woo-woo shit. This podcast is about getting clarity on what you want, having the grit to do the actual work, and most importantly, constantly training your brain to be your bitch. Ready to be inspired? Here is your host, best-selling author, Una Duncan.
Dr. Allan Bacon, thank you so much for being here.
Hey, thank you for having me on. I really appreciate it.
I am super pumped, and I have a very important first question for you.
So let's go.
Yeah, I was on Instagram and I saw another fitness influencer who was getting ready for a podcast, and she was putting extra bronzer and a little shimmer on her shoulders and doing some push-ups and lat raises to make sure that she had full definition. Did you remember to do that? Because I forgot.
I'm really bad about that. I also get groceries with my shirt on, so I'm not really following the right, influencer playbook here. But hopefully, I can make up for it with some good information.
Yeah, you are not representing. Okay, well, we'll forgive that, and I'm going to ask you my first question that I love to ask to all my fellow fitness professionals. What is one bit of fitness advice that you would love to see fucking die?
Oh my God.
Or the thing that's pissing you off most today?
I have a big presence as far as like myth debunking goes. And the issue that we have here is that there is so much information out there at this point that it makes it very difficult for the average person to figure out what's right. To disseminate that information in the right way is a very difficult thing for most fitness professionals as well. The biggest issue that I'm seeing these days is that women's health is being essentially preyed upon and attacked. And so I would love to see people move away from the, hey, this is what women should do, to, hey, this is actually what's good for everybody. Because generally what we see in the research is that there's not a massive difference between what women and men do. And it's almost like the pink tax.
It's a pink razor. They're charging us extra by saying this is for women.
Yeah.
And also rage baiting us by being like, women have been so ignored. And the thing is,
there's never been a study done in women ever.
Right. And the thing is, there is some truth there that women's health has been like, it's because there's that element of truth that everyone's always like, fuck yeah. But then they're saying, fuck yeah, forget all science. We've been ignored forever, which.
Yes. And I think that that's sort of the issue, is that women have been disenfranchised for so long. This is going to sound really bad, but you can, as a woman, you can tell me to screw off if you want to.
Excellent.
I think that what ended up happening is that the pendulum swung completely in the opposite direction, and we missed where we should have been, which was more in the middle. And I think a lot of that had to do with the fact that male doctors, the fitness establishment that was mostly run by men, research that has been mostly run by men, has largely ignored women, at least up until the 90s. Mm-hmm. And then in the 90s, we started to get more and more and more studies about women. Yeah. Right. But the problem was the damage was already done. Psychologically, sociologically, it had already been done to women. We've women have said, hey, I'm going through menopause, I'm feeling this. And doctors have been like, just suck it up. And, it sucks. But, and so we're ignoring the experience that women are feeling. And so when we've swung this pendulum in the complete opposite direction, it's because these influencers, many of which are doctors, have tapped into that kind of internal rage.
Yeah.
And it was a deserved internal rage based off of what had been done in the past. The problem is they're using that to then monetarily gain and push their own outcomes. And so these women who are viewing these people as either a savior or an ally or somebody that's finally speaking the truth, they're actually getting conned in the opposite direction. And it's not because these women are dumb. It's because there's a lot of different demographics that have specific concerns, specific, both emotional and mental, about different parts of their life. Mm-hmm. And it's being preyed upon. And 100%. So now from a perspective of, if we want to be objective about this information, when especially a man puts out objective information about this type of topic, there's always skepticism. And it's because these influencers are leaning on that, they weren't looking out for you before, so don't listen to them now. They've never experienced it. And it's the same kind of thing as if we were to say, hey, all women urologists can't speak on their topic, even though many of them are very, very adept at what they do. You don't necessarily have to have the plumbing to be able to understand it, because of the way that it works with, reading nutrition, understanding human biology. And there's this big idea that because there are some differences between men and women, that therefore everything has to be polar opposites. Mm-hmm. And it just doesn't appear to be that way. We seem to be more similar than we are different. And so if we can acknowledge the differences, we can help women under this topic be less of a mark, I suppose, and actually get more results by understanding what's truly happening.
Yeah. It drives me crazy that there's, and it's so frustrating because every time I post something, I will get a million people being like, have you ever heard of insert menopause influencer?
Right.
Whatever. You know what I mean? And, and I just feel like, this person is not your savior. This person is fucking you over, but in a totally different way.
They're not your friend. It's a wolf in sheep's clothing.
100%. Okay. I have a million follow-up questions on this.
This is the topic that will enrage people, but then we can also get through some of this noise and be able to help people so they can understand what's going on and then make the right decision for themselves. Okay. And so the funny thing with talking about these influencers that prey on people like this is that what you just said in the very beginning when we started is very true. There are kernels of truth, or there is even a base of truth. And
women's health being ignored. Yeah.
Well, yes. Or hey, women need to start lifting weights when they get into menopause, or whatever it is. These claims are oftentimes based in truth, and they can show you certain studies to back up a little bit of what they say, and not mention that then they're making leaps beyond that to sell something.
Yeah.
And so if you know what's actually being said, you can gain the benefits without the potential negatives, either wasting your time, spending unnecessary money, buying into, it's funny that we're saying this on a podcast, but buying into podcast appearances for people that may be trying to manipulate you. And the manipulation is the bad part. That's what we need to get out of there from both men and women. The fact that men, doctors, the research often, just kind of overlooks women, and we need to get past those fake female allies that are trying to position themselves to sell you something. And so hopefully we can meet in the middle there.
Right. So one of the rallying cries of these people is women are not small men.
Yep.
Okay. And I've heard you respond to that. Women are also not large mice.
Yeah.
So
And
can you talk about women are not small men?
So it's true, women are not small men, but women are still humans. So when we're looking at research and when we're trying to objectively look at a topic, whether you're a man or a woman, we should be looking at the topic as, based on the best research that we have, we're going to assume that someone is human. So until we have research to suggest otherwise, we're going to function similarly. The idea that there is no research in women is blatantly false. You look at any topic that is in fitness and nutrition, and you're going to find likely a wealth of information in women as well. And it's not necessarily that you have to have a study that says this study was in menopausal women and it showed this.
Yeah.
There's a lot of times where we have very large samples of menopausal women. It's just not titled that.
Yeah.
For instance, if we look at things like Ponzer 2021 was a seminal study that looked at resting metabolic rates in thousands of both men and women across the age spectrum. They found that from the age of 20 to 60, we don't see significant drops in resting metabolic rate. Doesn't matter your gender. Doesn't matter what your menopause status is.
Yeah.
And so we can use the study to say, hey, look, there is no significant change in resting metabolic rate during this period. So menopause is very unlikely to destroy your resting metabolism rate.
Yeah.
And people will dismiss this research because they're like, well, it doesn't say menopause in the study title. And you're like, right. But there's like 1,000 menopausal women in this study, and not a single one of them is showing a drop in resting metabolic rate.
Right.
With these large sample sizes, we can still pull information from this, on top of the fact that we actually do have studies in menopausal women showing that it doesn't.
Yeah.
But even if we didn't, we have to be conscious of the other research that's out there, because that can give us a clearer view of what's actually going on during these changes. And so when we look at these types of things, the influencer is pretending it doesn't exist when they say we're not small men or there's not enough research done in women. And the answer is yes, we can always use more research in specific populations. That doesn't mean that we dismiss the research that we have in those populations because we don't like the outcomes, because it doesn't get us money as an influencer. You cannot ignore it. And then you cannot, at the same time, substitute murine or mouse data to push your point.
Right. Okay. Well, I have a follow-up question, but talk about the mouse thing for a sec.
So what we're finding with a lot of the menopause influencers is that they will tell you, hey, this is what happens in women. And then they'll give you a study and it will be on female mice.
Right.
Instead of female humans. And so very few people are actually looking at the studies that are being presented. So people are accepting that there is a study citation, but they're not looking at the actual study itself. And so particularly for this group that says women aren't small men, they have historically used a lot of murine data. So they're not suggesting that women are small men. They're suggesting that women are large mice.
Right.
And that's a disingenuous take. You know, you cannot use mouse data. We use it as preliminary things as a preliminary piece in research. You do something in a mouse to see what happens. It can guide how we set up studies in humans. It doesn't prove what happens in humans. In the same way that if we look at the genetic amount that we share with mice share the same thing with lizards, the same distance apart. Yeah. But you wouldn't do studies in lizards to tell what's going to happen in a mouse.
Yeah.
And so I think that people are having this real problem with distancing the two from each other and saying, okay, well, just because there's mouse data doesn't mean that we can make these leaps into humans. And in nearly every case that I've seen this used, there has been data in humans that discredits the mouse assumption.
Right. Can you give us an example? What's a common mouse theory that you hear out there?
There are things that have to deal with cortisol and, say, cardio type exercise. They'll make the mouse run and run and run and run. And they'll say, hey, there are some problems that this cortisol causes in the mouse. Therefore, women can't do this type of cardio. Now they're ignoring the fact that cortisol rise isn't necessarily a bad thing. It is used as a way to liberate energy. It actually liberates fat stores. It releases hormone-sensitive lipase, which increases fat oxidation. It increases fat burning. Now, they're not going to tell you that because cortisol is always bad in the eyes of these researchers or in the eyes of these influencers. Yeah. And so they will say, hey, look, we had these problems in these mice that we ran to death and didn't feed. Therefore, you can't go for a 20-minute jog.
Right.
And you're like, wait, what? Like that has nothing to do with the situation that I'm in. And, they try to use this as a way to, oh, well, you've got to buy my specific cardio. You've got to buy my supplements to keep cortisol down. You've got to buy my whatever it is to manage this issue. It's a created problem. Now, yes, chronically high cortisol levels, things like Addison's disease, is a problem. If you have PTSD, if you have these things that are keeping cortisol levels elevated for extended periods of time from non-beneficial sources, it can be problematic, particularly in the presence of a calorie surplus. In the presence of a calorie surplus, when we have really high, chronically elevated cortisol, it can cause fat deposition. And they'll show you that research and they'll say, hey, look, under these conditions, this causes this, so therefore you should stay away from cortisol at all times.
Right.
Well, I mean, cortisol spikes to wake you up in the morning. Cortisol spikes. If you're staying away from cortisol, you never work out because all workouts spike cortisol.
Yeah, for sure. And just to emphasize again, this is with a calorie surplus. Cortisol alone will not add belly fat.
No, in the presence of a calorie surplus. However, we still should not fear cortisol spikes in the presence of a calorie surplus from typical exercise. Yeah. It's still not a problem.
No, it's good.
Because
what doesn't kill you make you stronger kind of stress.
Yeah, I mean, there's that hormetic effect. The small stresses throughout the day can actually get your body to adapt and grow stronger. Mm-hmm. On top of that, one of the things that I've seen these menopause influencers say is you need to stay away from zone 2 cardio. You need to only do HIIT. And the problem with talking about this is because there's another menopause influencer that'll say you can only do zone 2. You can't do HIIT. Yeah. So with the ones that constantly fearmonger zone 2, it's really funny because they'll show you a study, and this is how they manipulate people. They'll show you a study and they'll say, hey, look, if we look at a person that did HIIT and we look at a person that did zone 2 cardio, at 2 hours post-exercise, the zone 2 cardio has a higher cortisol level. It's not gone down as much.
Yep.
100% true. If you extend that time period out, people that do zone 2 cardio have lower resting cortisol rates through the rest of the day than HIIT. Mm-hmm. Now, I'm not saying HIIT is a problem or the cortisol spike is a problem. What I'm saying is they will give you snapshots and then try to convince you that it says something.
Yes.
And then they'll try to sell you something afterwards.
Yeah. Okay. So we talked about how they create problems and they sell solutions. And so we can see why that's appealing to whoever's doing that. But it's also appealing to the consumer because the problem they're describing feels very real often.
Absolutely.
So for example, when I posted menopause is not making you fat, like I didn't get death threats, but people were pissed, really pissed because it's contrary to their personal experience. So when you have clients that feel this way, how do you validate their personal experience while also respecting the science?
The personal experience, particularly if we're talking about menopause specifically, the personal experience is real because things are different than it's ever been before. They can coexist, that the experience is there and real, and that menopause did not cause you to gain body fat. The change in hormones in menopause did not cause you to gain body fat or lose muscle. And this one in particular, I actually have long conversations with my clients when they bring this up. And hopefully if someone is working with you or is following you on social media, they have a certain level of trust so they can sit back and take it objectively, right? If it's somebody that you've never spoken to before, attempting to get through to them is probably a little bit of a wasted effort. But you can present the information and then leave it at that and not argue about anything else. When we look at menopause specifically, women have a lot of changes that go on. I mean, you've got the vasomotor symptoms. You're not sleeping well. You are typically, if we look at the research, protein intakes, which are low in general for women leading up into menopause. Mm-hmm. They almost have fiber intake halves. Saturated fat intake goes up. Calories in general go up. And so
behavior change.
There's a lot of behavior change.
Okay. Yes.
Now, there are certain things that are inherent to the change in the hormones themselves. I mean, when you have estrogen drop, particularly if it drops more precipitously than another woman's, maybe you have joint pain and maybe that prevents you from moving as much. And so your activity levels go down. Well, what happens if your activity levels go down? Sure, your energy balance changes and then you might be in a calorie surplus. It's not that the hormones are causing you to gain fat. It's that you move less. The hormones are making it feel worse. And the hormones do certainly make it feel worse. So when these influencers are trying to prey on people's experiences, the experience is actually very real, but their cause and effect is wrong. And that's where this really becomes problematic. And then they manipulate the information at the same time. So we have the SWAN study, the big seminal study that the influencers are using to show women gain twice as much body fat and lose twice as much muscle over the menopause transition. That is 100% true when you say it like that.
Okay.
But then we want to actually look at the data. And this is one thing that I put on an entire reel on. I'm like, yes, they are true when they say that, but this is manipulation of your emotions. Because when we look at that entire 4-year transition that they looked at this period for a transition. It was about 3.5 to 4 years for the menopause transition. They looked at some years after and years before. When we look at the menopause transition, that double fat gain over all of those years is 3.5 pounds in total.
Okay.
The lean muscle loss was 0.45 pounds.
Okay.
Over all those years.
Yeah.
Now that's double of what the typical change is if we just account, for eating, for age-related changes.
Sure.
And so this is in a population of people that are not sleeping anymore. Their diets have gone to shit. They are not exercising anymore because everything hurts and they're hot. And, is it surprising that someone would gain 3 pounds over 4 years and lose maybe half a pound of muscle when you're not doing any of this stuff?
Mm.
So it becomes this thing where like you say it doubles and it sounds precipitous. And then you're like, well, but eating has gone down and activity levels have gone down. And this is in a general population of thousands of women. And in Gen Pop, they're not lifting weights. They're not exercising or eating diligently like maybe the people that are listening to this podcast do.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So what do you think happens under the same population that actually takes advantage of those things?
Do we have studies on that?
We have a lot of information that looks at when women continue to exercise during these transitions, resting metabolic rate does not drop. They do not lose lean muscle. In fact, they will oftentimes gain lean muscle when you start lifting during these periods. And so these menopause influencers will come out here and they'll say, hey, women, you should be lifting weights. Well, you should have been lifting before. Like it was never a thing where like, okay, well, now you got to do it.
Yeah.
But they're using this data of everything's going to go to shit because of menopause. And it's menopause adjacent. And it's menopause adjacent because the experience is very real. And if you need things like menopause replacement, hormone therapy replacement, absolutely do it if you need it, if you're indicated for it. Don't do it as like, I'm just going to take this because I want to prevent lean muscle loss, because this hormone replacement has not been shown to actually prevent the loss of muscle.
Yeah.
But if it's something that can help alleviate symptoms that you're experiencing, 100% do it. And then stay focused on your nutrition, your training, all those things that you should have been doing before, through, and after. Mm-hmm. And you will put yourself in the best position possible. You're probably not going to lose any lean muscle or a minimal amount. You're probably not going to gain any body fat or a minimal amount. Then you'll get out on the other side. And the problem that I have with these fitness influencers that are telling these women, hey, these are all the problems. You need to buy my cortisol supplements. You need to buy my, go to my link with my weight vest and all those different types of like shtick things that they're trying to sell, is that what they're doing is they're taking agency away from women. Mm-hmm. This is your hormones. It's not you. It's still you. And we can say, I know they don't.
So here's the thing. When people are listening to this and they're hearing that it's not that your hormones are causing excess body fat or a drop in metabolism, it's that your behavior is going to change, possibly because of hormonal shifts. Your behavior might change. Now, I think a lot of people swear up and down, absolutely not. I have changed nothing. I have changed nothing. They do. And so, they do, right? And so here's my question. I know that people are not good at estimating their caloric intake, for example. Is that, and maybe you can give us some examples of that, is that to say that we are just not good at estimating our behavior, our caloric expenditure, as well as our caloric intake?
Oh, we're terrible at estimating our so we don't know anything about what we do. It's really funny. I mean, when you look at things and people say, well, I know my experience, I know what's happening, you 100% do not. And literally research shows that you do not. And that's nothing wrong with you. That is living in our own bodies. We are not objective about what's happening. There's a lot of different reasons that cause issues for that. There's a lot of subjective experience, but that's why we look at these objective studies. And the objective studies do not agree with it's the change in hormones that's causing this. It just doesn't. It never has. When
we tell people you're not good at determining whether your behavior has changed, and I think that they would come back and say, well, I have an Apple Watch that's measuring my activity. I track everything that I eat. I'm only eating 1,200 calories or whatever. So I think I just want to bounce back to you. What would you say if they're like, I know I'm not changing anything?
Let's test that.
Okay.
And I've got a lot of ways that I test it with my own clients. And every time I've tested this, it's shown, okay, well, I'm doing something wrong. And this is the thing for the people listening to this. This is not to make you feel bad. This is there's something that you don't know that you're doing.
Yeah.
Now, if we can figure out what it's not, then we can move towards what it is. And the first thing with figuring out what it's not is we pretty much know it's not the change in hormones.
Yeah.
We know it. So knowing that, what is the problem? Because if we're constantly chasing something that's not the reason, you're not going to be as successful as you would be otherwise. And it's very difficult to have the self-reflection and take responsibility under these situations because the situation itself is much more difficult than other times in your life.
Yeah.
And when they show you studies that say, hey, you gain more visceral fat during this period, yes, that does happen, but it still requires that calorie surplus to happen.
Yeah.
So they'll show you these different things that really affect this. Now, when we're talking with somebody that says, hey, this is what I experienced, I'm 100% sure, what we typically have to do is say, okay, well, then let's follow along with your diet and then let's figure these things out. Mm-hmm. And if you are so sure that you're doing that stuff perfectly, you need to sign up with a coach and you need to have it evaluated because you're not objective about the situation and you need the second set of eyes. And my wife, like she handles this a lot of the times because she's one of the coaches that works, under Maui Athletics with me in our company. And she will say, okay, well, let's look at your logs and we'll see errors that are being made that people don't really understand that they're making. I mean,
Can
and
you
even
give
in
an example, like measuring peanut butter, for example?
Well, measuring peanut butter, anything that's not a liquid, you should not be using a volume measurement for. So if you're using like a teaspoon or a tablespoon for peanut butter, you are completely screwing it up. From the start. Right. The differences in calories, and that can be like 100 or 200 more calories than you think.
Yeah.
Just from the start. But these are those things that like people don't really realize that they're doing. Are you weighing cooked or uncooked? Are you weighing cooked or raw?
Yeah.
That makes a big difference.
Yeah.
Use the information that is appropriate for that because a lot of people will use raw information for cooked measures and not realizing that they're making a mistake there.
Right.
There are a lot of people that don't realize that they're doing more bites, licks, tastes, snacks. You're eating your kids' food when you're cooking your kids' food. Totally. I mean, people say, I don't do this type of stuff. And then invariably, almost every time, it appears that they are doing this type of stuff. When we look at this in the research, particularly for people that are having issues with excess levels of body fat. Now, you will expect that if a person has been fighting with being overweight or obese for long periods of time or after a transition period like this, there's something probably that they're doing that they don't realize that they're doing. So the numbers on this are probably a little bit higher than if we looked at populations of people that were leaner, because if you're leaner, you're either intuitively eating as a lean person or you're actually tracking correctly.
Right.
So when we look at people that have issues with losing body fat, they're overweight or obese, and they have issues with losing body fat, we often find that a median for how off they are in tracking is that they're assuming that they're about 1,000 calories less per day than what they really are.
Holy.
In obese populations. Yeah. And I actually made a post about this with the research probably 2 or 3 weeks ago.
I think I saw this. And I think you even said that even dietitians miscalculate their
250
calories.
to 500. They're closer to 250, but that's a registered dietitian. That's a person that's been trained specifically in doing this. And their error is about 250 calories per day. Let's go to the low end of that. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
So if you're a woman, and if we look at the research that looks at the standard resting metabolic rate of a woman in the United States is about 1,460 calories per day. Now that doesn't count activity. And so if we talk about, how much a person walks, if you're getting more than 6,000 or 8,000 steps per day, you're probably adding a significant number of calories on top of that. It can be anywhere from 500 to, if you have an agricultural job where you work on a farm 10 or 12 hours a day, you're probably burning an extra 2,000 calories. So let's assume that you're a normal person, works out from home. We're going to give you a moderate level of activity. You're probably burning 1,800 calories or something like that. Okay. And I think that can surprise people because if you're a registered dietitian, there's a 250 variance on that. You might think that you're 250 calories lower, and you might actually need 1,300 or 1,400 calories per day even to lose weight.
Yeah.
And then you're 250 calories off from that.
Yeah.
I mean, that's almost 10% of your daily intake right there that you're off.
Right.
And so people think, I'm really good at this. you could be decently good at it, but even small errors, particularly the smaller that you go, and people that are 170 pounds or smaller, your daily calorie allotment is pretty low to begin with. And then you start to cut body fat. I mean, that's even lower. Mm-hmm. So relatively, these errors that people are seeing are big chunks of their day. And so they're getting in a lot more calories daily than what they think. And it's no wonder they're stalled. Okay. You know, so there's a lot of different things that are adding into this. And hopefully if you've got someone that swears that this is the case, they're a little bit objective. So you can talk to them about this. You can show them the studies. You can say, hey, look, this is what we see. So knowing that it is very unlikely that it is your hormones, why don't we identify what it could be?
Yeah. And
then you have to go into essentially what I call a diet audit. And you say, okay, well, I need you to track and track and track. And then we look at things and we start asking questions, you know, are you doing like what percent ground beef are you using? And, you know, if you were using the information for 90% or 93% ground beef and you're using 90, I got some bad news from you. The difference between calories between the two is massive. It doesn't sound like it would be a lot. It's huge. It's really big. And especially if you're eating it multiple times a week, it can add up to quite a lot of calories. And so, you know, for people that are making these mistakes, you say, okay, well, let's look at your tracking for a little while. And for people that don't want to track, I guarantee you that if you track for a month or two, it's going to give you a lot of information, even if you don't plan to do it for the rest of your life.
Yeah, for sure.
This is going to be something that helps you a lot.
Yeah.
And so that would be my next stage when I'm working with somebody that we're talking to about that type of stuff. We'll identify any gaps, identify any holes. Sometimes, and I'm sure that if you've coached enough people, you've run into this, you do that and you don't find any holes. They're doing something that they don't know that they're doing.
Yeah.
They just don't know where it is. And when you ask the questions, a lot of time people will gloss over it. You'll ask them a very distinct, straightforward question, and they will tell you the answer that they think it is, and it's the complete opposite. Whoa. Now, as a coach, if you're not sitting there watching them make the food, you can never identify that. But you do have a way to figure this out. And it's something that I call the boring as fuck protocol.
Excellent.
And so what I do is I tell people, I actually have a write-up, so I don't remember the exact distinct numbers, but it's like you can have like 150 grams of chicken breast, you can have 100 grams of white rice, and you can have 2 teaspoons of extra virgin olive oil. And we'll do that 3 times a day for 7 to 10 days. Okay. That's it.
Oh,
now you explain to a person, this is our protocol to identify. We're cutting out literally everything else from your diet. You're drinking water. You can, you know, salt this. You can put some seasoning on it as long as it's like herbs and spices. Doesn't have any calories. And we're going to see what happens. And they're like, well, that sounds like an awful diet. And you're like, 100% is.
It's horrible. Yeah.
But it ends up being something like 1,450 or 1,500 calories. And maybe in the plan that you were working on, you had yourself down at 1,200 calories because that's where everybody hits before they say my metabolism's broken.
100%. Yeah.
It's for some reason, it's always 1,200 calories. I don't know why that number specifically.
Yeah.
But so they'll say, well, I'm on 1,200 calories and I'm not moving. Well, this one's above that. Almost 100% of the time, unless the person is very, very small, we start to see the scale move by day 10, 12, 14. And it starts to just go down.
Yeah.
And then we're like, okay, we 100% know that this is a tracking error somewhere. And that's how you can figure out, is this the issue? Alternatively, you could get an RMR test with your doctor to figure it out and see, okay, well, my metabolism's not broken, so therefore it is still a tracking issue. But these are the ways that you prove to a person that it's tracking probably.
Now, I feel like I just heard everyone's ear perk up to be like, wait, what's this test? How can I test my metabolism?
Resting metabolic rate or basal metabolic rate test.
Okay,
you can go to your physician. You can go to your physician and say, hey, can I get a resting metabolic rate test? I've been trying to lose body fat. It has been, you know, a real chore for me. And I want to make sure that there's not something going on health-wise. And the cool thing when you go to your physician about that is that oftentimes insurance will cover that if they prescribe the test.
All right.
And so I recommend doing that and identifying it. And I probably have 3 or 4 clients a year get those because we'll do all these tests and then I'll bring up the boring as fuck protocol and they're like, I don't want to do that. And I'm like, okay, well then you need to get an RMR test. And so they'll go and get an RMR test and it's never come back that metabolic rate's a problem. Never.
Wow.
Never.
Wow. That's so interesting. It is funny to me. There's such a medicalization of fitness right now with all of these tests. And as we've talked about cortisol, even the Dutch test, maybe you want to speak to that because I know a lot of people do that.
Stay away from it.
I know. Yeah. Okay. Well, anyway, what I wanted to say was it's interesting to me how much people want to do all these tests, but I'm like, have you tried vegetables for a little while? Like, have you
Right.
tried really being consistent? Like not for 2 weeks, but like really doing it for a while.
Yeah.
And I think people just want to skip to just test my metabolism. I think there's something wrong.
Yeah. I mean, especially for women, we have to be conscious of the fact that there's a menstrual cycle, right? And so like if you're only tracking for 2 weeks, what happens if you get to the part of your menstrual cycle where you're retaining some water? Like that's going to completely blind any changes on the scale because
Right.
you're holding water weight. And so hopefully what you're doing, if you're working with a coach, hopefully you're taking some circumference measurements, some progress photos, some scale weight, so you get a better picture of what's going on. But for women in particular, I would compare 4-week intervals rather than 2-week intervals, because 4-week intervals are going to be more reliable because you're going to roughly fall at the same point in a menstrual cycle during that period.
Right.
And it takes time, and be really conscious of the fact that stuff that you eat that's a variance within about 48 hours of a weighing experience is going to alter that. And so, if you have some extra sodium, if you have some extra carbs, if you change fiber dramatically, if you change your water intake dramatically, within 48 hours, if you travel during those periods. I mean, when people are like, well, I'm traveling and, I'll get back and I'll get my weight when I get back. I'm like, don't do that. I'm like, wait like 72 hours and then, then we can get a measurement. But when you're doing these things, be conscious of what's going on, because those things are all going to influence the output on the scale and maybe even circumference measurements. So make your life easier. Don't weigh if you've had any of those big things. Like if you had like a nacho platter, I've had people do this. They've had like a nacho platter and then they weigh in the next day for one of their check-ins and they're like, I'm up 8 pounds. And I'm like, right. In 48 hours from now, it'll be fine. Maybe you gained a pound. It's okay. Let's not really worry about this. But to give some standardization for the people that are trying to do this, I always tell people to take measurements and weigh under the same conditions, because this is how you cut out as much of that water flux as possible. It doesn't get rid of it all, but it can cut out a lot. First thing in the morning upon waking, after going to the bathroom, before any food or drink. Always do it at that point, because if you are changing up the times of day that you do this, you're going to have a lot of variance in potentially the scale and what's going on there. I mean, if you weigh one time in the morning and one time in the afternoon, you've got a lot more food weight, you've got some like water retention, you've got, all of these different things showing up in the results that you're getting. And then you're going to think, okay, well, I gained 3 pounds. You didn't gain 3 pounds. That's just 3 pounds of food that you didn't have the last time that you weighed. So let's keep this as standardized as possible. And the way that I had mentioned before is the best way literally to do any of these measurements and weighing, because it's the only way to control as much as we possibly can in any given day.
I mean, we did acknowledge, back to the women are not small men, we did acknowledge that there are hormonal fluctuations which will impact sleep. And, there's a menstrual cycle. Like there are definitely things to be acknowledged. And I also wonder, so there are physiological differences which can create behavior changes, which can have certain effects. But I also wonder, I mean, do we need to acknowledge more the logical differences, like the fact that women are still doing more of their share of the housekeeping? Midlife women are often looking after children and parents, the peak of their career. You know what I mean? There's a whole bunch of other stuff going on that I feel needs to be acknowledged a little bit more than the hormone story.
Sure. I mean, again, any of these different types of things can affect how consistent and adherent you are with a diet and with the training protocol and all that stuff. So, I think that it's a good thing to set some goals for yourself whenever you're trying to make these changes or stave off as much of these changes during a menopause transition or what have you. And when we do goal setting, I think that this is a really important thing to discuss, because I think that this is a thing that a lot of people mess up. If you're using a goal weight, you've screwed up from the start. Because how did you choose that number? It's typically, well, that's what I weighed in college. Okay, so are you the exact same person in college? Do you want to look better than you did in college? Because particularly for women that are older than 20 years old, like you probably didn't lift regularly prior. Now, this is a very stereotypical thing, but like, let's think back on the way society looked at these types of things. And as close as like the 90s, the whole societal stereotype of beauty was stick thin.
Oh, yeah.
And so I love how things have changed. And I think that CrossFit is a big reason for that, because you started seeing women that were athletic.
Powerful.
And people love that. And I love that.
Yeah.
The issue that we're having is that as women have shifted their mentality to that's what I want to look like, society has beaten into them the way to get there is to just lose weight. And so we're still setting our guidelines of success. Like, if the scale doesn't drop, I'm not succeeding.
Yes.
We're still setting we're using outcomes, and outcomes should never be the basis for goal setting. What if you say, I want to be 140 pounds? Okay, cool. What if you look better at 145?
Yeah.
So you set yourself up for problems from the start because of two things. One, you either don't reach that goal weight and you feel like a failure, or you do reach that goal weight and then you've lost the driving force that gave you motivation to begin with. And because of that, we see recidivism a lot of times when people set things like goal weights. So rather than doing something like that, why don't we set goals based off of habits and routines instead of outcomes? You can't control how much you lose on the scale. You can control how many steps you have in a day. You can control roughly how much you sleep. You can control what you put in your mouth. You can control how many times you go to the gym in a week, for the most part. Now, just because you can control how many times you go to the gym for the week doesn't mean that in one period of life you can't change based on what's going on versus another period. And what you brought up with, well, maybe they're taking care of a kid, or they're taking care of, I've got a lot of clients that have dependents for whatever reason. Their parents are getting older, particularly as we get older, that kind of thing. And so maybe at one point in your life, you're getting into the gym 5 days a week. And then maybe now you can only get in 3. That's okay. You still set your goals based off of what you can do sustainably now. But when you set your goals based off of that actually is something that you can work towards, you can monitor. I mean, step count's another one of those things where we talk about daily activity levels. These are things that you can roughly control. Yeah. So when you talk about, hey, it's a tangent here a little bit, because you had said, well, what happens when we talk about people that have women have these things going on in their lives that maybe other people don't have. And I think that's a very valid point. We fall back on proper goal setting.
What we can do.
That's how you manage
and the actions
this.
We can take.
Yes. So I'm not ignoring your question. I'm kind of addressing it from maybe a different angle. But we address this by acknowledging that we have these challenges in life, and then we control what we can't control. And this is that whole all or something instead of all or nothing. Because a lot of times women will say, hey, I mean, women are harder on themselves than men are, because women take care of themselves more. And statistically, objectively, this is true. I saw patients for 10 years. Women were much more likely to, hey, you need this done, get it done immediately. Women were much more likely to finish out an antibiotic regimen. Men, I forgot. Oh my God, dude. Like this is so bad for you. So this is one of the reasons that women get preyed upon, because women are more conscious about their health and they're more active in their own health. That is a good thing in that you care about yourself. It's a bad thing because it makes you a more proper mark for people that are trying to take advantage of you.
I have a quick funny story about that. The other day, my husband, who I love so much and respect so much, but he has never done a consistent exercise program in the 15 years we've been married. And the other day, I just, out of curiosity, I was like, why do you think you prioritize taking care of the yard and the car more than yourself?
Right.
Yeah. And he was like, oh, I don't know.
Men do that.
Yeah.
Men do that. And so when I bring this up, I don't mean it to sound like stereotypical or in a bad way, because you could certainly be the opposite of what I'm talking about, the person that's listening to this. But I mean, literally in med school, we are taught, hey, your women are better patients. Like, that's literally what they say. It would sound like a horrible thing if you said, hey, men are better patients. That would sound very sexist. But we just looking objectively at information, women are much more likely to take care of themselves, which is a wonderful thing. So let's focus that on things that will actually help you instead of worrying about things that will just raise your stress levels. I mean, if you want to talk about cortisol causing problems, be super stressed out all the time over things you can't control.
Yeah.
Be super stressed out about the fact that you're not 140 pounds. And particularly if we've had that change in what we believe we want to become, and that athletic toned look is what we want to become, you're going to be heavier than what you think your goal weight is. 100%, I guarantee.
Yeah, for sure.
Because muscle weighs something.
Yeah.
You know, my wife, who has like no body fat, is like 155 pounds at 5'6". And for most women, they'd be like, oh, I don't want to be that heavy at that weight.
And then you're like, well, look at her.
She's great. You know, she's perfectly healthy and perfectly fine. But if we were setting goal weights, no one would ever say that. And I don't expect people, my wife is kind of an exception because she was a world level Olympic weightlifter. And so she's beyond what
slight exception.
Most people are trying to become. But the point remains, you don't know where you're going to be your happiest. You don't know where you're going to feel your best. You don't know where you're going to be the most confident. And just historically, we've always valued very light weights, very skinny as the sign of success. And we're still trying to get there, even though we like the idea of the athletic toned physique. We're using the methods to get to the 1990s crack model booty instead of the peach booty. So we need to change up the way that we expect success to look and the way that we expect success and progress to look if we want to actually get there. And if you've always tried throughout your life to just see the scale drop, that right there might be the reason that you've never succeeded and why you've always been on the diet roller coaster, because you haven't valued those time periods of building strength, building lean muscle, going Operation Wonder Woman, consistently being afraid and shying away from any gains on the scale when that might be exactly what you need to finally succeed. And I'm not saying if people have obesity or are significantly overweight to up the scale. What I'm saying is at some point, you're probably going to see scale hold steady when you're building lean muscle. You're probably going to be at a point where maybe building lean muscle is the right path. And, you know, foregoing all of that, I need to lose weight on the scale immediately as a sign of success.
Yeah. Which can be so hard for people who've been conditioned their whole lives to measure themselves in a different way. Allan, I wanted to do a bit of a lightning round, if you can handle it. I'm going to throw out a subject and you just give me like a sentence or two gut reaction. Is that okay?
Based on my responses so far, do you think a sentence or two is what's going to come out of my mouth?
Okay, let's give it a shot. And if you feel like, I need more on this one. Okay. Eating late at night will make you fat.
No, you're fine.
Okay.
How
How
curt do you want me to be? No, so okay, real quick answer. When we look at the research that looks at this, it doesn't matter what time of day that you eat, as long as the total daily calories are equated between conditions, you're going to have the same outcomes.
Perfect.
Next question.
All right. If you want to tone, do high reps and low weight. If you want to build, do heavy weights and low reps.
No. It's the way that you lift weights, whether you want to tone or build lean muscle, is the same. You're going to be working within close proximity to failure. Whether or not you build optimally or whether or not you kind of tone down as far as size goes is more dependent on your total daily calorie intake than it is on where you're lifting rep range.
Right. But you'll build muscle with high reps or low reps as long as you're going to failure with either.
Both men and women, as long as you're between about 4 and 30 reps, experience the same growth. Now, here's the thing. This is a kind of a nuanced conversation. Between 4 and 30 reps, as long as volume load is equated, we'll experience the same growth when the sets are taking close to failure. Beyond the beginner stage, that's 0 to 2 reps short of failure. Mm-hmm. Okay. Now that's the big issue that most people have, particularly women.
They don't go close to failure.
They don't go close to failure. No. And that's because men have an easier time with that because men grew up kind of lifting weights and playing sports where you really had to force yourself to get through the discomfort. Whereas women, particularly women in the older demographics, they didn't necessarily do didn't necessarily do competitive sports as much growing up. So I think younger women don't have quite the same problem that are conditioned for this. And if you're a woman that's in the older demographic and you've lifted for long periods of time, you don't fall into this definition either. I think that as a general rule, when we tell people, hey, we want you to lift, a set of 10 reps. I want you to pick the weight that is going to have you fail at the 10th rep. I mean, statistically, what we see in the research is that people are like 5 reps off or so. Yeah. So they're underestimating their abilities by five reps. Yeah. Most people will quit at about 80%, 85% of what they can actually do because they're like, oh, that's starting to burn a little bit. I want to stop. Yeah, They think that it's at failure, but it's not. And I actually run something called an intensity test with my clients where I actually test this and we identify how close they are to failure. And I can tell you that the women are worse at this. Women are much better at taking care of themselves. They're much worse at this than most men, although there are some men that are off. But I I will usually find that people are about 3-5 reps off from where they should be. I've had some cases where they've been like 24, 25
Whoa.
reps off. And
so to do the intensity test, can I just ask how it works? So you're standing next to them and they're doing bicep curls or push-ups?
No, I do everything remotely.
Okay.
But I have an entire copy paste that I give because the process is the same for everybody that does this. And I kind of like kick it out to them once a training cycle to be able to test this. And I do this because it teaches people, men and women, to get in that proximity to failure that I want them to be in. So I tell them, I expect you to be off by, when we test this, but I want you to be really honest with yourself. And I want you to go until you get to momentary muscular failure. Momentary muscular failure is when you cannot complete a rep. You fail in the middle of a rep. So get a spotter, tell them I am going to go until I fail.
Yeah.
I tell people, okay, well, I use a double progression model whenever I plan things. So I'll say something like 3 sets of 8 to 10 reps or whatever it is. And I want you to be at 1 rep in reserve. So theoretically, if they've chosen the right weight, 1 rep in reserve is 1 rep away from failure.
Yeah.
So if I told them 8 to 10, they should get 9 to 11.
Got it.
If they're doing it right. So I tell them, look in your logbook, take that weight you think that you should be doing for whatever I program. We've been doing this I don't do this in the beginning of a cycle. I'll do this like a month in.
Yeah.
Figure out what that weight is. And I want you to take this set to failure. Get a spotter, tell them so they're safe, what you're doing, and then do it. And that's where we figure out where they are. And like I've said, I've had people that are close to 30 reps off. And so then I'll say the situation, okay, well, if 4 to 30 reps, anywhere between 4 and 30 reps works for growth, as long as you're close to failure and you're 30 reps off from failure, do you think that this is going to work? And it's typically no, because the intensity is too low. So you have to both get in a proper range for volume and proper range for intensity for it to work. You cannot just go through the motions. This is the biggest mistake that I see the average woman make when she goes into the gym. Mm-hmm. If it's a working set, if you're programmed 3 sets of 10 or whatever it is that your coach is programming or whatever you've gotten, that very first set should kick your ass. The very first set.
Yeah.
If the very first set doesn't kick your ass, it is another warm-up. Mm-hmm. You've just done another warm-up. You cannot count that towards your sets.
Yeah.
And this is something that is very difficult for people to wrap their heads around, men and women alike. But it's critical that if you want those benefits, and particularly women who are listening to this and are saying, well, I don't want to go into osteoporosis. I don't want to, lose this lean muscle. This is how you do it. Now, if you are osteoporotic or you've got bone demineralization, please speak with a physiotherapist. Don't initially take yourself to like failure and cause issues. Outside of those situations where you're a healthy person that doesn't have a restriction in the way that they lift, start lifting normally and get regular with it. Once you've been lifting steadily for 2, 3, 4 months, then you want to start paying attention to your intensity because you need to build up a little bit in the very beginning and not worry about this intensity. You just want to make it a habit that you get in, allow your body to adjust, allow soft tissues to adjust, tendons, ligaments, that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. Outside of that very beginner stage, 3, 4 months in, that's it for the rest of your life. You're consistently going to be working in proximity to failure. And if you're not lifting correctly. Because if you want to have those adaptations to bone health, to lean muscle health, to strength, to injury reduction. I mean, we look at strength training and injury reduction is up to 69%. So if you want to age gracefully and be able to pick up your grandkid, be able to go on a hike, you better start paying attention to this type of stuff. You better start paying attention to the intensity with which you work. Don't waste your time when you go into the gym. Yeah. This takes enough time as is. Let's not have it wasted. Yeah. And this is one of those really great ways to be able to make it count. But you have to be conscious of the fact that you're probably sandbagging most of the time because it hurts. I mean, this is
the thing. People are like, but that will suck.
It does suck, but you actually start to like this after a while. And I promise you in the beginning, when you first start working out, that soreness, that delayed onset muscle soreness that you get for 48 hours or so after you lift, it's most prevalent when you first start lifting, and it gets less and less and less over time. You eventually start to miss it, believe it or not. Yeah. But it is something that is
alive.
It makes you feel like you had a really good workout. Now, it's not necessary for a good workout. It's not an indicator of a good workout necessarily, but understand that when you feel these types of soreness levels, it's not always going to be like that. You just kind of have to keep pushing through. If it's really dreadful, you probably have too much volume in your program to begin with, at least for whatever your ability is. But that proximity to failure, you don't change that. You adjust the volume. if you're not recovering or if it's really problematic. And so,
like that.
you thought that you were going to get away with a really quick answer, but no.
Okay, I have two more lightning round
Sure.
that I want to get to. All right, muscle confusion keeps your body guessing, and you'll get better results when you constantly vary your workouts. All right, my friend, I am so sorry I had to cut the conversation there for this week. Next week, I am back with the rest of my interview with Dr. Allan Bacon, and we are going to cover that muscle confusion question, and we're going to talk about the real difference between weight training and Pilates if you want a long, lean look. And we talk about what's really going on if you do actually feel like you kind of get bulky from heavy lifting. And we're going to talk about the next big scam that is going to replace menopause marketing in your Instagram feed. And the single best fitness gift you can give your children. And this one actually really surprised me. As always, I would love to hear your reaction to the episode. So hit me up on Instagram or press the speak pipe button below, and I will see you next week. Hey dude, thanks for listening. If you like this episode, make sure you're subscribed so you can get the next one. And by the way, if you rate and review this podcast, it really helps me get found by other people who need some goals, grit, and some woo-woo shit. And be sure to connect and DM me at Una Duncan on Instagram and let me know what you thought of the episode. Chat soon.